This podcast is proudly sponsored by Philips OLED Plus Ambilight TV. OLED Plus is the name given to the multi-award-winning combination of the latest and best OLED panel technology, enhanced Philips P5 dual-engine picture processing, the next generation of Philips Ambilight, plus superb sound by Bowers & Wilkins. Philips OLED Plus delivers the best TV picture and sound quality as an immersive performance unmatched in the premium TV market. Discover more at www.philips.com/OLED.
Hello and welcome to another AV Forums podcast. If you're joining us live on YouTube, good evening to you. Thank you very much for joining us. It is the 5th of December at 7 p.m. if you're watching live. If you're not watching live, that means absolutely diddly squat to you. But Merry Christmas is what I'll say. Joining me tonight is our regulars. We've got Ed Selley, we've got Ian Collen, and we've also got Martin Dew. Good evening, guys.
Hello, sir.
Good evening.
And joining us a little bit later on because he's running late. He's been on a job today and he's still travelling. Hopefully Jules will join us a little bit later, maybe in about half an hour's time, to talk calibration subjects and screen uniformity. However, he may not turn up. It depends what the roads are like. So we'll see if Jules makes it along. But anyway, thank you for joining us tonight. The chat window is open right now if you are watching us live on YouTube. Get your questions in there. We will do our very best to get those answered this evening. So yeah, get scribbling, get your questions in. And what are we talking about tonight? Well, we're going to talk TV. We're going to talk the World Cup, official World Cup TV from Hisense. That's the U7H. I had the 65-inch version in for review recently. The review went live today on AV Forums. So if you want to go have a quick look at the review and then get some questions in, please do that. If you've got questions, get them in. If you listen a little bit later in the week, obviously it's podcast@avforums.com, or stick your question in the thread associated with this podcast on AV Forums. You can find the podcast forum. It's right down the bottom of the forum list. You shouldn't be able to miss it down there. It's next to the feedback forum. Right, so like I say, we're looking at Hisense. Ed's going to look at T+A Solitaire T headphones. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And we're also going to talk about adding a subwoofer to a 2-channel music system. Is it something that you should do? Is it something you should avoid? We're going to talk pros and cons about that a little bit later on. And I think there'll be some different opinions when it comes to that kind of thing a little bit later on. So that should make for an interesting conversation. Martin's going to look at a very cheap 2.1.2 soundbar. And is it any good? Well, we're going to look at that and look at the value end of the market and see what you actually get for your money when it comes to Dolby Atmos at that end. Like I say, Jules, if he turns up, we're going to talk about TV panel uniformity. What is uniformity? We talk about it in reviews and mention how good some TVs are and how bad others are. Why is that? Why is there a difference in terms of the uniformity? We'll get into that if Jules turns up this evening. We're also going to troll through the world of hi-fi, AV and home cinema. Ian is going to wake up and he's going to give us the news. And we're going to go through all that. And then, of course, what we are watching on the small screen that isn't football related, we'll get into that as well and give you some little pointers as to what you should go and watch if you're football to death at the moment and sick of schedules being moved around and everything else for 22 millionaires to run around kicking a bit of leather. Right, so before we get cracking on, Editor's Choice Awards, we've mentioned them a few times. There's still a couple of podcasts to come up. We're going to talk home AV and projectors in a podcast, so keep your eyes open for that. But AV Forums Editor's Choice Awards, they're the best products of 2022. They are now published. You can go and read and find out what we have chosen as our favourite products of the year. There will be some omissions in there. You'll think, well, why wasn't this product, because it's really good, mentioned? The likelihood is that we didn't review it. Again, it's been another tough year in terms of getting samples and so on sent through. Again, we get to the end of the year and award season out the way, and then all of a sudden there's samples available and they're piling up in our hallways. But for the majority of the year, it's been difficult and hold things. So if there's a product you really like and it isn't mentioned, that's probably the reason. It has to be a product that we have reviewed. But the last two categories, home AV and best projectors, went live last week. So go and have a read of those if you haven't already. And like I say, there'll be another podcast coming up soon And we'll be getting into home AV and projectors in that one and going through the lists. Right, so before we get started with tonight's podcast, just a quick catch up of what everybody's been up to. I'm going to go first because all I've been doing is buying suitcases for Vegas. I didn't realise just how expensive suitcases suddenly are. Especially, I thought it'd be cheap at this time of the year.
But everything's expensive. I mean, suitcases are not immune to that. So, you know.
Yeah, well, of course, going to Vegas, you need the largest ones possible. So I've got 2 large suitcases, the best part about 150 quid, which I wasn't expecting to be paying that. And I've also been painting the flat. I think I mentioned it in the last podcast, trying to get ready to move on, and I had an emulsion accident. Went up to Screwfix, got 2 big 5-litre tubs of emulsion, put them in the boot of my stepdad's car, actually. I drove back to where I needed to be, opened the boot, and of course they'd moved. And I hadn't realised, and one rolled out. As it is in slow motion, you think, you're trying, and you got to try and catch it, and it landed face down on the lid, and it just exploded. And of course, I live in a public street, so we tried to mop up as much as we could and wash away what else we could, but there was this white streak that just ran all the way down the street where that had been.
So how much was on you in the car, or did you get lucky?
There wasn't much on me. And the car, there was a slight splatter which just wiped away. I was emulsion, so it's water based. It just wiped away. Wasn't a problem. But yeah, the street was a bit of a mess. It was emulsional.
He's here all week, folks. Don't forget to tip your waitress.
Yeah, but don't try the veal. The veal's a bit iffy. Right, so that's what I've been getting up to. Not a lot there, and of course reviewing. There's still a few reviews to come through for this year, so keep your eyes on the homepage. Ian, what video game have you been playing this week?
Not quite so much. It's been more kind of admin rather than the fun stuff of gaming this week. Obviously, been working very hard on lots of other things and not watching the World Cup very much, honest. Also, it's my niece's 21st birthday, so I'll probably give a shout out to her for making me feel very, very old indeed.
And I've just got to say, why on earth would she be watching the podcast?
Well, he's hedging his bets. I know.
Okay.
Admire that.
All right,
the whole family's in, so I'm doubling our numbers on a week by week basis.
Is that how we're going to get there? We'll just rope the families in.
That makes
Definitely. Well, we should just do birthday shout outs. Be like, there we are.
There you go. And what have you been simulating this week? What part of life do you no longer want to do and you're just going to simulate in a game?
It's still Minecraft. I'm still wrapping up that. It did have the slightly annoying feature of where I was doing it for an annual, which I obviously you play it and you're kind of screen sharing it for the purposes of this annual, so you're very focused. So after I finished a lot of that, I thought, okay, you kind of get in the mood to just want to play it for fun again. So I kind of started all over, and of course, as soon as I started it, everything that I'd spent days and weeks kind of searching, trying to find for work purposes, just suddenly appeared right in front of me. It was like the perfect respawn, the perfect way to start the game all over again. And it happened like 2 days after I really, really, really needed it to have happened. Sod's law and all that, I guess.
But, the law of sod. Yeah, absolutely. Somebody's probably getting messages. Martin, what have you been up to?
I've just spent a week in LA. I had to
lovely.
clear out a storage unit, actually, so it was kind of business over pleasure, although I did get a chance to see a number of friends. And actually, I managed to sell my drum kit on my US eBay account, or at least the shell pack and the hardware, just when it finished an auction last night. And talking of luggage, I actually brought my cymbals home by using the extra baggage option with BA, which is $100. Now, it sounds an awful lot, but actually $100 for, I think it's up to 36 kilograms, is a very, very economical way to ship stuff abroad. And it's worth keeping that in mind, because a FedEx or UPS or even a United States Postal Service option would be multiples of that for a similar weight.
Yeah, because you'd be paying your taxes and stuff, wouldn't you, on top of that? So, yeah. Good advice there. You see, we're full of good consumer advice on this podcast. And Ed, what have you been up to?
Not a huge amount. It's been reasonably proactive. Phil will confirm that I had my November reviews in and up on the site by the 2nd of December, which by my standards is on time.
Yeah.
And I've got most of the stuff I'm going to do over December for January here already. Don't get used to it. I think it's just more that companies just wanted it out of their stock rooms and into my hallway. But yes, so that's been going on. And yeah, otherwise it's just been the laborious task of. But I mean, my parents. What do you buy the people who already own everything they want? And yeah, I mean, you've got to somehow find presents for them. But I'm mostly there sorted for that. So yeah, same old, basically.
Yeah, it's a nightmare Christmas shopping and trying to think what people like that want, because it's they've got everything, and you end up just asking them anyway, don't you? So
yes.
There you go. Right, so we're all up to date. We're going to get talking AV in a sec, and we'll get the show on the road.
If you'd like to support the AV Forums podcast on a regular basis, then why not become a patron? Head over to patreon.com/AV Forums to sign up. You can also make a one-off donation through the Super Chat or via streamlabs.com/AV Forums. All donations help us to improve the website and the podcasts. Thank you to all our supporters.
And David Oliver, thank you very much for your support. A new patron joining us. So thank you, David Oliver. It is appreciated. If you want to sign up, you've just seen all the information in the ident there. Your support is appreciated. Thank you very much, everybody who does support us on a regular basis. And of course, we've got the new Patreon level where you get to see our editorial content ahead of time. If that interests you, head over to patreon.com/AV Forums and have a look and sign up. Thank you very much, people who have. And if you sign up, you do get a chance to win some exclusive competitions. But this one's open to everybody. So what is the competition at the moment, Ed?
Yes, you can win the ultimate streaming amplifier, courtesy of Roxanne. That's the Atessa streaming amplifier. Competition's still open. This is a blinding product. The review's up on the site. It sounds very good in its own right as an amplifier, and then it's got Blue OS on board. So if you already have Blue Sound speakers or NAD products, it will talk very nicely to those. Blue OS is an absolute joy to use, and it's built like a lorry. This is, you can't say fairer than that. It's 1,500 quid's worth of stuff, and it's open to all eligible Forums members resident in the UK, except Phil. So just get stuck in, could be a nice Christmas present.
Yeah, no, that's a cracking price. Get yourself entered into that one. Of course, there's lots of movies to win as well, lots of discs and so on. Kaz is going to tell you all about that in the Movies podcast, which does follow us tonight at 8:30. So if you're interested in that and all the competitions we have open, some cracking discs there, tune into the Movies podcast. The lads will be going through that a little bit later on. Right, so let's move to some AV and hi-fi news. AV first. We're talking Roku, Ian.
Yes, yeah. Our UK audience in particular might be seeing a fair few more Roku TVs staying around in the coming weeks. Excuse me. Starting with TCL, which probably might be grabbing a few headlines by laying claim to the first QLED TV in the UK to be running the Roku TV platform, with the launch of the RC630K, which is now available. It comes in 43, 50, 55 and 65-inch flavours, with prices ranging from £319 up to £699 for the largest one. It's not hugely different to the likes of the C635 and the C735, which Phil will be very well aware of. But those are Android and Google TVs, so this is a UK exclusive 4K Roku TV. It does come with a few concessions to keep the price down, but offers up a very nice affordable alternative to the rest of the TCL range.
Yeah, TCL doing some good things at the minute. I was impressed with their TVs. I mean, don't expect miracles at this end of the market. They are LCD TVs. They need to be used in a normal living room under normal lighting. Don't try and watch them in a dark room. That's where the technical inefficiencies of the technology come through, where you start to see backlight bleeding and so on. But to get QLED down to that price as well, so quantum dot layer for colours and so on. The only thing, again, to be wary of is peak brightness at this end of the market. You'll be lucky to see 350 to 500 nits from these TVs. So again, HDR won't be mega impactful, but you can't complain at the price point, and TCL are really quite impressive at the minute. And we reviewed the C735, which I was impressed with. So nice to see Roku coming in, and it's not just TCL, Ian.
No, RCA. I assume very much US based. Also coming over to the UK with a range of equally affordable, even cheaper Roku based TVs. These include a 32-inch HD model, which is priced at just £129. There's a 40-inch full HD version for £169, with a 55-inch 4K TV for just £269. Again, the features list isn't going to compare to the more expensive models doing the rounds, but you will find the likes of HDR, Dolby Audio, Bluetooth support, plus of course all the benefits of the Roku TV channel and the OS that comes with it. But yeah, in terms of second screen options or some very useful budget options in the current financial climate, could also be well worth a look.
Yeah, everything I said about TCL obviously applies to the RCAs as well. They're a little bit cheaper, so yeah, don't expect miracles, but at those price points, like Ian says, second TV or kitchen TV or whatever, perfectly suitable for that. Let's move over to some hi-fi news. What are we talking about there, Ian?
Yeah, well, people always say we talk about very expensive products, so we thought we'd throw in a slightly cheaper option to begin with, which is HiFi Audio has announced the GoLink portable DAC and headphone amp, which is just £59. Which is a very cheap plug-and-play solution that you can just use to connect your headphones to a PC or laptop. Comes with a couple of extra adapters in the box as well, if you want to spread it out to other devices. Comes with the DAC using a Sabre HiFi chip, packing some decent technology, potentially offering some really good value for money, especially compared to the company's existing portfolio of DACs that we've looked at and reviewed in the past, which have all been
well, they've been reasonable. I mean, I would say the thing that HiFi have been able to do here is that we've already tested the Go bar, which is fairly expensive for a single input DAC, although it does lots and lots of clever things. So this slides in very neatly under that, and also it has the virtue of fundamentally being its own adapter and things like that as well. So if you I mean, they've essentially got both ends of the market covered off here. So if you want to genuinely improve the performance of your audio performance of your smartphone, the Go bar is sensational. It's probably the best of its kind. If you are simply bemoaning the lack of a headphone socket on your phone, this is going to be a more than adequate replacement for that. So, I mean, essentially they're just covering all bases. And yeah, it's at sensible money for once in our lives. This is very reasonable.
Yep, this is EV Forums, people. We are talking about budget.
Mm.
Ian, anything else we need to look at?
Yeah, another thing of interest is Mission announcing the return to the integrated amplifier market after a mere 40-year absence, at least under its own brand name anyway. It's the 778X stereo integrated amp, which follows on from it doesn't follow on, it's doing what Mission's done, similar with its speakers. And it's kind of a reinvention of an older and presumably much loved product of its time. Obviously being modernized for the digital era, with all the various bells and whistles that come with it for the digital marketplace. Bearing in mind that when this was first launched, CDs were still relatively new technology, so it's obviously come a long way since. It's priced at £549. Obviously comes with a new selection of inputs and outputs, along with the likes of Bluetooth compatibility and all of the digital upgrades that would be required of it. New DAC chipset, Class AB design at the power amp stage, delivering 45 watts into 8 ohms, and basically all the rest of the information will be on the website if you want some more specs on that. But again, it could be interesting to see what they could do after such a long absence.
Well, obviously they've got some help. I mean, it's all part of the International Audio Group, so
yeah,
you can hypothesize that there's a fair amount of part sharing with some of the Audio Lab and other devices they already make. But this is a cool looking product. It channels a bit of retro without being painfully retro, and the spec at that price point is extremely good. I have requested one. If we get one, I will get a review up on the site as quickly as I can, because I'm quite looking forward to getting my dirty hands on it.
Are we starting to get a bit tired with the old retro and
a number of our readers are starting to get I mean, they hate the retro craze with the fire of 1,000 suns.
I thought that might be the case.
And I do agree that you can have too much of a bad thing. I would say that I think if you know what the original looks like, this is a nice looking homage. If you couldn't give any care, I was going to say something totally different there. Yeah. If you don't care less about what Mission was doing 40 years ago, you can look at this and it looks perfectly smart. I don't think it looks painfully retro. I don't think it looks dated, and I don't think you have to suffer for your art. So I think personally that they've pulled quite a nice balance here, but obviously feel free to disagree with me violently in the comments section. So,
Okay, and I'm sure people will.
Yes. If we've learned anything, they will. So,
yeah. Right, so that wraps up news for this week. So let's move on to some reviews and some of the things that we've been looking at. I'll go first with the TV just because it is up on the site. So this is the Hisense U7H. I looked at the 65-inch version of this a number of weeks ago now, and it went up live on Monday. We've had a whole rush of TVs. Like I say, there's been lots of delays in terms of samples coming through, and they all turned up like buses all at the same time. So this has taken a little while to get published, but it is the official TV of the World Cup. Obviously, Hisense are a big sponsor of football. They sponsor Leeds United in the UK, their stadium and stuff like that's all branded Hisense, and lots of the major competitions, World Cups and Euros, have been sponsored by Hisense. Great way of getting your brand out there. In terms of TVs, we spoke about the U8H a couple of podcasts back, and it was a little bit disappointing. It looked great on paper, whereas the reality wasn't quite as sparkling as it looked in terms of specs and so on. When we got down to actually testing it and looking through it, it was a little bit mixed. I have to say the U7H is a better TV because it's not a mini LED. It's still a local dimming, full array local dimming system that's being used here. 90 zones in total. It's just a little bit more subtle. It's done a little bit better. There's not as many issues with blooming and clouding and screen uniformity issues. They are still there because it's a throwback of LCD technology, and it's one of these things that you can't get away from. You're going to introduce it in some form or another, and it's not a TV I would recommend for critical movie watching in a dim room. If you want that kind of thing, go find an OLED or a bit of a better spec LED LCD. This is not particularly bright with HDR, measured in at 600 nits full screen. 600 nits on a 10% window is 500 full screen. But again, it does the thing where it dims down the smallest areas of the screen, which is where you want the brightest area. When you're talking about HDR, so 1%, 2%, 5% windows, it dims them right down, and it does that to try and stop blooming. Because if you have a zone with that kind of brightness next to a black or a dim background, you're going to get a lot of halo bloom all around that object, and it's why TVs have blooming suppression in them, like this Hisense. So it kind of takes away from the dynamic range, which is lacking anyway, because it only does 600 nits, and black's measured in at 0.04, which is quite high black for, actually. So it really needs to be viewed in a room with good ambient lighting, so a living room or a kitchen or a bedroom. Used in those circumstances with the VA panel, you need to be watching it dead on. So don't sit higher than the TV, don't sit lower than the TV, and don't go 30 degrees or over to the sides, otherwise you will get gamma and color washout on the screen. You need to be watching bang on. Another thing, watching off axis, is blooming becomes more apparent around objects and so on, and even in bright scenes, if you're watching off to the sides, because of the gamma drop off, you will see the actual zones, the actual blocks of light lighting up and so on. So if you can avoid all of that, use this in a bright room, a living room, kitchen, whatever, as a second TV or as a gaming TV. It's got two HDMI 2.1 inputs at 48 gigabits per second, so full bandwidth there. There's only two of them. One is also your EARC, so if you want an EARC device, you're going to lose one of your HDMI 2.1 inputs, but everybody's in the same boat this year. Hopefully the new MediaTek chips coming next year do open that up to 4 HDMI 2.1 for those manufacturers using that silicon on chip. But this is last year, so you're restricted to the 2. But yeah, it's a very reasonable TV. I scored it as a 7. If you're looking for a second screen TV, something for gaming on that you're not particularly that worried about, it has got filmmaker mode. It was okay out of the box. It wasn't perfect, but it was a lot better than the vivid and the natural modes, which look too blue and pump the colors too much. Nice remote control, nicely designed. It is plastic. It's made to a price point, but it looks good on a TV stand. The only really disappointing thing was the audio system was really, really rubbish. It just didn't sound good at all. They'd taken the subwoofer out of the back, which was on the U8. This one didn't have the sub. It was an empty enclosure. So it didn't sound great. So if you're going to get one of these and you want to use it and have good sound, I would recommend a soundbar of some description. to go with it. But if you want any more information on that TV, a deep dive into it a little bit more, have a look at the graphs and so on, then the review is live on the homepage at the moment. And again, it's not a badly priced TV either. I think I tested it. SRP was £849 for the 65-inch. I believe you could probably pick that up for about $650 to $750 if you shop around online.
Ridiculous amount of time.
Yeah, for a 65-inch TV, that's where you get your value. So yeah, I mean, if none of those negatives are an issue for you that I've pointed out, and you're not somebody who wants to sit and look at films in a dim room, it's a perfectly reasonable TV, perfectly reasonable in terms of accuracy if that you want that kind of thing as well. And HDR wasn't too bad. In fact, the color volume and the color saturation was very good for wide color. It wasn't too far away. 94% XY, 97% UV of the DCI P3 color space. So it did pretty well at that. So yeah, mixed bag. But if you're looking for a second TV, like I say, put that on your options list and have a look at it and go and have a read of the review. So we're going to change tact a little bit, and we're going to go to audio now. Let Ed just swig his beer. And T+A Solitaire T wireless headphones. What are they, Ed, and why should we be bothered?
Well, we should be bothered because I'm afraid all of you, you and Martin have actually been quite value oriented. This podcast, I'm not, because this is the most expensive pair of wireless headphones we've ever tested, and as far as I know at the moment, the most expensive pair of wireless headphones you can buy. But hear me out on this. I'm going to choose my words carefully, but these actually potentially count as quite good value, because I have to admit that on occasions you read the press release for something and you miss the detail. And I got these in for review because we've looked at the T+A Solitaire P, which is one of the most expensive headphones we've ever tested, and at £5,000, one of the most expensive headphones you can buy. So I thought, well, let's see what happens when they do wireless. What's important, and I'm not going to do much in the way of technology because I've done a 2,600 word review which will be going up, and you can plow your way through that, and I think it's reasonably well written. But it's really important to stress that T+A hasn't just gone and built a wireless headphone. The reason these are fairly expensive is because they are essentially two headphones that operate at the same time. If you want, you can flick a switch and turn everything off, connect them via a supplied umbilical cable, and they are a completely passive headphone. When it switches off, the complete wireless circuit, the amplification circuit, the Bluetooth circuit is all switched off and bypassed, and they operate exclusively in a passive mode. Now, most of the wireless headphones that we've tested this year have got USB input only. This has USB charging and a genuine analog input. They operate as genuine analog headphones. And not only do they operate as analog headphones, they sound absolutely outstanding. We've tested the Focal Celeste. These are hovering around £800 to £1,000, depending on where you buy them. Oh, my cat's turned up. Excellent. I would say the T+A is absolutely competitive with the Focal Celeste. In fact, in some regards, it's better. And then you can flick a switch, power them on, they will pair with your phone, and you can walk out of the house. It's it sounds like a minor distinction, but these are as different in approach and design to something like the Mark Levinsons that we handed an Editor's Choice Award to, as you can imagine. And it makes for a headphone which is not going to appeal to everybody. As a true wireless noise-cancelling headphone, hopefully I'm not going to antagonize T+A too much by saying this, I do think that the Mark Levinson probably has the edge. However, if you are simply looking for something to do both of these roles, there's nothing to touch it. In the review, I describe it as a Range Rover with a headband, because it does two not totally different roles, but it manages to do two things that no other wireless headphone I've tested up until this point can do. So it is expensive, but if you read the review, you'll find out it's extremely good, and it can do things that no other headphone we've tested up until this point can do, which puts it in a class of one, basically. So if you are looking for such a thing, and I don't know how many people are, that's obviously up for T+A is obviously about that they do exist, you might find that this is exactly what you need. Reviews up on the site. If you have any questions, please ask. I think I've been reasonably thorough. I've gone wandering around outside in noisy environments and tested them with a few different things, and in passive mode and in their smart HQ mode, which is also unique to them. I'm not going to go on to that because it's, again, all in the review. See what you think. Don't judge this book by its cover because it is significantly different. And this bloody cat. Right, that's me done.
Okay.
Because
Cat's that review to the end. Okay. Yeah, the review will be going up this week, so keep an eye on Aviforum's homepage for that. Should be in the next couple of days anyway. And if you're a patron, subscriber, member, and you have the extended version, I don't know what it's called. If you have the more expensive one, you will Star Support is what it's called. Somebody just told me on the headphones. Yeah, you get to see the review ahead of everybody else, probably a couple of days ahead of everybody else. You get early access to our editorial content. So yeah, we're looking forward to that review. One review that has been published, but Martin's going to talk about it because we're going from reasonably expensive in a cost of living crisis to affordable. But what do you actually get for your money, Martin? This is an affordable Dolby Atmos soundbar. Is it any good?
Well, you also get a subwoofer with it as well.
Right, okay.
And these guys in Cambridge, Eddie Latham and PJ Scott, they've basically set up shop in 2012. And although they're based in Cambridge, they're not necessarily at the hi-fi end of the spectrum. They're definitely at the value end. And I think therein is the point that in what I'm referring to as a cash-strapped age, and certainly an inflation-rampant age, I think these kinds of products are going to hold more weight. Majority is a Brit brand. It seems they mostly go for OEM-type stuff, things that come off the shelf. I don't know how customized these are for each market. It's difficult to find that stuff out. But they produce a soundbar here, which is at the top of their soundbar range. They do DAB radios, internet radios, and also computer speakers. And actually, I will be reviewing, or we will be putting up a review of the DX20, £29.95 computer speakers very soon as well. But this soundbar is at the top of their range at £279.95, but I think you can probably find it cheaper. Amazon is usually the outlet. And in fact, these two guys are e-commerce experts. This soundbar is 96 centimeters long and a rather high 8.1 centimeters. So it could produce issues if you're placing it near to your TV and depending how the stand is built and how high the screen is off the surface. It has 4 forward-facing drivers, 2 upward-facing drivers to achieve Dolby Atmos. It is called the Sierra Plus 2.1.2 Dolby Atmos soundbar. And the Dolby Atmos actually piggybacks off Dolby Digital Plus, so it's a lossy kind of Dolby Atmos. And of course, there's an attendant sub as well. Now, the sound is quite wide. It's quite satisfying. It's not very articulate, and the ceiling-based Atmos effects are definitely lacking. But it's not bad value for money. The bass is, again, also a bit inarticulate, a bit rumbly, not really tying in, and can feel a little isolated. But it's not bad. It's and like I said, it's quite a big sound. It's quite a wide sound, and I did say in my review it's quite good value for money. But 7 out of 10, nothing higher than that for this package.
Okay, I mean it is what it is at that kind of price range. But it's interesting to see a company I'd never heard of, and they approached us and said, "Do you fancy having a look at this?" And we have, and it's middle of the road where you would expect it to be at that kind of price.
Totally, and good for them. I mean, obviously these guys are very entrepreneurial, and they've identified a gap in the market, and they're going for it.
Yeah, good stuff. So if you want to read the full review, the review was published a few weeks back now, so go and hunt that out. It's on the forums. I'm dying to see what Ed's watching, because Ed's giggling away there. What are you watching, Ed? You're muted now.
I probably ought to admit that my girlfriend is watching this and commenting in real time because... Okay. Against my better judgment, I sent the link. So yeah.
Right. Okay. I was wondering what was keeping you entertained there. Yeah. Right, right. So that's all the reviews for this week. If you got any questions, the chat window is still open. Get your questions in. Anything you want to ask us about, whether it's about tonight's subjects or not, we'll try and get round to them. If you're listening a little bit later in the week to the recorded version or the audio version, then of course you can send your questions to podcast@avforums.com on the email, or go to AV Forums, look up the podcast forum, find this episode and leave a question in there. We do look at the threads, we do look at the feedback, so any feedback you have for us, shove it in there and we'll go and have a read of it when we can. Right. With that out of the way, we're going to move on to some of our discussion topics for tonight. We're hoping that Jules is going to join us this evening. He was a bit late on a job tonight. He did say he would dial in as soon as he got back. So if he does, we're going to talk about panel uniformity. If he does, we're going to be finishing early. So,
or we can have a damn good argument about the next subject. In fairness, there's passions will run high.
That is a possibility, Ed. So what are we going to talk about? Well, we're talking about two-channel. Now, we're not talking about home cinema in any way. We're not talking about multi-channel audio in any way. That includes music that's been mixed in Dolby Atmos and so on. We're not talking about any of that, or Sony's Spatial 360 or whatever. This is two-channel. This is HiFi, as Ed would call it, whether it be a vinyl-based system or whether it be streaming and so on. You have your system set up. You have your desired speakers. Do you add a subwoofer to the system? So I'm going to come to you, Ed, first. You are the HiFi purist on the podcast. What is your view to adding a subwoofer?
You might be surprised on this. It's less fundamentalist than it perhaps was a couple of years ago. And there's two reasons for that. If you feel that you are looking to add a subwoofer to your system, it is now possible to choose components that will help you make the best of that. And I mean that this happens in a variety of stages. You've got things from adjustable crossovers, which are now fitted to a variety of products that we've tested over the years, all the way through to companies equipping products with Dirac and other EQ systems. Lingdorf does a room perfect stereo amplifier as well. Devices like this will essentially iron out most of my reservations about using a subwoofer. It's not to say that I'm a passionate advocate of EQ, but I do believe it has a time and a place, and I do believe that it has worth. It's the case that if if it's that or no bass at all, then by all means, that's a sensible way to do it. My issues when you're not using more specialist hardware are that to do a decent 2.1 installation winds up being as expensive and space consuming as using a larger pair of passive loudspeakers. Is my considered opinion on this. Again, feel free to violently disagree with me in the comments. But if you're not using EQ like Dirac or Room Perfect, the subs need to be on axis with the speakers that you're using. You need to make sure that they are, essentially what you don't want to be doing is making phase adjustments for the subwoofer being somewhere else. You want to make sure that its integration with your speakers is as absolutely straightforward as possible so you can achieve a seamless handover. Once you've got subs on axis with a pair of stand mount loudspeakers, that's pretty bulky. I mean, even if it's only one sub, that's going to take up a fair amount of space. And I know bass is omnidirectional, but you still get a rather greater uniformity from a smaller subwoofer per channel than you do from one hulking great one. The caveat to this is a product that we've got coming up it's in the review queue. It's been uploaded to the site. I've been testing the Miller & Kreisel D95, which is a wall-mounted stand mount loud. It's not a stand mount loud. It's a wall-mounted loudspeaker. Miller & Kreisel are fanatical about measurements, as fans of the site and fans of the brand will know. They make it abundantly clear that you can't expect much more than 95 hertz from it. So you really would need to use it with a subwoofer. And something like that, where they're not taking up space because they're on the wall, again, a subwoofer on axis there, that starts to be a more efficient, more space-friendly, more room-friendly solution. So things like that work as well. It remains my belief that if you want to do it properly, just have two channels with the widest bandwidth you possibly can. But I'm not averse or blind to the idea of adding subwoofers where that's not necessarily the likely outcome.
I definitely come into this as someone who has a multi-channel system first and foremost, and then it becomes a two-channel system if I want to listen to music. I've never had a standalone, up till now, had a standalone two-channel system. It's always been a bigger system that I've chosen to use as two-channel, and I've always gone sub-sat. I've never had four standers. I've never owned a pair of four standers. So for me, going sub-sat, well, it's just in the name, you have to have the subwoofer. And I agree with you, Ed, getting them to integrate so you no longer know that the subwoofer is there and it's just one speaker. And even better if you can have it, behind the screen, acoustically transparent, and your eyes not drawn to the speaker, even better. There is something to be said about getting it out of the way so you don't see the speaker, you don't see the subwoofer. Getting it dialed in, I agree with you, is the biggest problem people are going to have. No two rooms all interact the same. The room is a big issue that a lot of people overlook. EQ can help, but you really need to set things up properly to start before you add EQ. EQ is not a miracle worker in any way whatsoever, and can sometimes go the wrong way and make things worse. So yeah, I think from my point of view, I would certainly say the room is the most important thing, first of all. Then what is it that you're using for your audio system? Are you using full tower speakers, floor standing speakers, or stand mounts? Do they need that extension? I've heard some stand mount speakers that do not need any help whatsoever in terms of their musical playback. I've never felt that they were missing the bottom octave at any point with tracks, but then they're multi-thousand, tens of thousands of pounds worth of speakers that can do that, and again the amplification behind it. So yeah, I've always used subsats. I've always been used to that approach, and to me, if you do it right, a subsat system becomes a full range speaker. You have everything covered as long as you have the room acting the way you want it. You have them perfectly placed, and you get them dialed in. And dialing them in is the hardest part. So that's my experience. Martin, what about you?
Yeah, I agree with many of Ed's points, actually. I don't really like the kind of untidiness, if you like, of having a speaker that goes down below 80 or 90 hertz and not using that part of its frequency range and then asking the sub to do the rest. Although, as you say, those M&K D95s are probably primed more for that that kind of application. And of course, you've got the whole thing with bass is like, do you need two subwoofers? Of course, the Lingdorf room calibration system is absolutely primed to use two subs. They've ironed out a lot of those potential issues. But if you are only using one sub, you're inviting potential compromise in a flat frequency response. So two, of course, would be recommended putting out a mono signal in a home cinema. And of course, I'm definitely a satellite sub guy. I'm all AV and listen to my music on an AV system as well. But yes, you've got to get bass right, and you'll know if it isn't.
No, it's also, it is very subjective. I mean, from a hi-fi perspective, I'd rather listen to a system that bottomed out in room at 45 hertz and did so in a neat and tidy and integrated way than one that had another 25 hertz below that, but moved at the speed of mammal evolution. It's a subjective thing, and it comes down to some of the music that you listen to.
And you need a much larger enclosure to do that, of course. So it's a practical issue.
Yeah. And I mean, coming back to single sub, it does work for some people in some systems. We're not saying that it doesn't work. But certainly my philosophy from very early on was to use multiple subs, to not for extra SPL gain, because you don't get that. What you get is being able to iron out the room response and your bass response, and that is the whole point of multiple subs. If you think it's going to add extra SPL, you're going down the wrong route. That's not the way to go. use the extra subs to balance out the room
coverage and smoothness. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what you should be aiming for. So I think we're more or less on the same sheet here. Actually, I thought there was going to be a bit more debate than this. But
interesting questions just cropped up very quickly. Grumpy Capybara, silly question, but how can you tell if your sub is in reverse polarity? If you do a search, I can't do it now because I've been busted typing on people anyway. If you do a search for sub-polarity test tone, there is one which you can download for the princely price of nothing, and it essentially just does a sweep down, and you will essentially hear if it just goes down in a linear fashion, or if there's a sort of hiccup as it reverses from where the subwoofer is. So I would, essentially it's not too difficult to do. And in terms of most analog subwoofer outputs on stereo amplifiers, they do not mess with the phase on that. So long as the phase control on the subwoofer is not then inverted, it should be absolutely fine. It shouldn't be something that you will be encountering on a 2-channel system. It's only with AV receivers potentially deciding to do it when they run their auto cal and they feel that that's what gives the best results in terms of a room response, which isn't then necessarily taking into account the time and beat of music.
Yeah. Okay, like I said, Jules has just arrived, so let's get Jules' input here. Good evening, Jules. What's your thoughts? He came in midway through the conversation, but we're discussing adding subs to a 2-channel system for 2-channel playback. So what's your thoughts?
Oh, blimey. I just heard Ed saying, argue with me. So it sounded like a Monty Python sketch, doesn't it, really?
Yeah, I come up with an argument.
Yeah, no, you didn't. Yeah, no. I mean, most of the people I come across have got AV setups, and I would always say multiple subs. 2 subs, much better than 1. In fact, we spent a whole week at the Home Acoustics Alliance training just shifting speakers and subs around and measuring and see what the difference is, and absolutely go with that approach. That multiple subwoofers at least 2, if not 4. It will give you a much smoother bass response through your room, and it's much better. I suppose it depends whether, if you've got 4 standards, how capable they are down that bottom end. And if they're good, then you perhaps don't need subs. It is subjective, as was said, and some people prefer the sound with the subs and some without. I mean, if you're a real 2-channel purist, which I'm not, I've always had a subsat system, then I suppose you'd think that subwoofers are spawn of Satan. But but no, I think it's I think having a sub to help with the bottom end if you have floor standards, and going as low as the bass output from those floor standards is decent and good, makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, and I've heard a few floor standards that I certainly couldn't afford to buy, but where you just think, well, you don't need a subwoofer with this. And the most recent of that was the B&W 801 D4s, which they use in Abbey Road for the main.
Yeah, that's not really something that generally needs subbing, in fairness.
No, but then they are £33,000 a pair. So I certainly won't be able to afford a pair of them. But anyway, I think we've covered the subject. Anybody else want to add anything before we move on?
I think somebody asked a question about
all right, we'll read it out and let's end.
Well, actually, I can't see it now, but I think somebody said, for us plebs, can you tell us what on-axis means?
Oh, right. Well, that's, essentially just if you have 2 speakers against one wall and you are then in a hi-fi system planning to add a sub, try and keep that sub on the same wall. The moment that it's in a different physical location to the 2 speakers, you are then entering the realms of having to adjust for phase. So the timing of when it fires is going to be at the same point as when your speakers fire. And that can be quite complicated to work out. So you are essentially just creating a rod for your own back. If you can avoid it, do it.
Ed, different speakers have different on-axis and off-axis response, and
they
some
do.
are specifically designed that way for different applications.
No, this is true as well. So essentially, I know as men we find this hard to do, but if you consult the manual or website of the product that you've bought, you will find instructions on whether it should be towed in and other things, as Martin says, whether it should be pointed at you or not. And essentially, you will then need to essentially do some powerlifting with your subwoofer and work out how it then behaves in relation to these speakers and what they do. So, yeah, there's an element of trial and error. But going back to what I said right at the beginning, if you think this is going to be something that you want to do, the Arcam SA30, various NAD products with Dirac, they will quite happily get a subwoofer working as part of your system, and they'll do it in a way which is relatively painless, and the results are very listenable.
Excellent. Well, I think we've covered that subject as much as we can this evening. But if you've got questions, like I say, either fire them in this evening. We'll try and cover them before we finish, or better still, head over to AV Forums, go to the podcast forum, and add your question against this podcast, and we'll try and answer it there. And if not, we might raise it in a future podcast. It's probably not going to be before the end of the year now, because we've only got one podcast left to go. We'll tell you a little bit about that in a second. But yes, get your questions in and we'll try and get them answered. I did see a question pop up by Paul Munger. He said, can he hire any of the AV Forums team to calibrate a projector? Yes, Jules is your man. He's sitting here.
Yeah,
at the moment. He's available. Or you head over to AV Forums and have a look at the Finder. And stay tuned to the podcast. We're going to get into calibration next year in quite some detail, and we're going to talk about training and professionals and all that kind of thing, and get people from the industry involved as well on the podcast. So if that interests you, stay tuned next year to the podcast. We will be flipping things around a little bit, changing the format slightly, but we intend to deep dive a lot more into the subjects we've covered. So stay tuned for that. Right, so we just need to do the final discussion point tonight. The question was raised a number of times: what is panel uniformity? It's something that I mention in every review. It's at least one paragraph in every review mentions the panel uniformity. I know the answer to this, Jules, but I'm going to ask you to answer it for everybody else.
You know, I hate it when you say that. I know the answer. It's like, it's like exam questions.
But for everybody else, what are we talking about when we talk about panel uniformity? Because it's not just one thing.
No, well, I mean, yeah, there's a bundle of things, but in its briefest form, no panel is identical to another panel, and there are many reasons for that. That may exist on a sort of a calibration end, whereby it's the white balance that's maybe different from one panel to another. But there are other panel uniformity issues, such as banding and DSC, dirty screen effect, and issues like that, which are all about panel uniformity as well. So some are fixable using calibration tools, and some are not so fixable and exist more on an engineering level. So there's kind of two separate things there, but they will come under that banner. Yeah,
and each technology has their own version of screen uniformity issues. So if we go to projectors, first of all, you're basically forcing light through a panel, and how that panel reacts when you're forcing the light through, whether that's laser light or bulb light or whatever, can have effect on the image that you see on screen, and in terms of how that's set up. Now, that could be a difference in brightness going from one side of the screen to the other, or corner to corner. It could be focus, which again is another uniformity issue because it's not uniform across the screen. And the other thing is color fringing or color tint. You might have one side of the screen that's red and the other side of the screen may be blue. You have issues like that. So that's projection. And I am skimming across the surface of this very quickly just so we can get all the bits in. But moving on to OLED. So if it's an LG display, normally at about 4% or 5% brightness, so really quite dark. If you're looking at an LG display, you will see very light banding on the screen, and that is just down to how the panel is put together. They all do it. They all do it to certain degrees, but they all have that. The good thing is that on a properly set up TV, you will never see that issue if you're looking at a 4% bright image on screen. If it has anything else on screen, you will not see that banding, or you certainly shouldn't see that banding. There's other things like posterization that could be an issue at the low end. Vignetting is another issue that you get with OLED panels, where it's slightly darker on the outside.
On one side,
yeah. And staying with OLED, the other thing is slight tint. So the more off axis you get, you start to get a tint. Now, OLED's very good for wide viewing angles, but it's not perfect. And this is another
No.
myth that needs to be busted. You know, there is no such thing as perfect off-axis viewing, even with an OLED. So be aware that you will get color shift. And again, that comes down to the uniformity of the panel. You're not going to get anything that's completely uniform. QD OLED is a new technology. And Jules, we've been really surprised at just how clean
Absolutely.
those panels look. You don't see any issues with them.
Yeah, when you come from watching an LG produced panel to watching a QD panel, it's quite a revelation, actually, because when you buy a new panel, a lot of forum members will know this. They're a bit apprehensive. You know, what are they going to get from the lottery, as we call it? But every single QD OLED panel I've seen has had superb panel uniformity. So I can imagine that Samsung, who produce those panels, will be saving quite a bit of money because they're not having all these returns from people freaking out about 2% slides and uniformity near black. So they are excellent.
Yeah, and again, we're talking about uniformity, which no matter what you throw it at, sometimes you just can't get rid of it either.
Yeah.
It's ingrained in the panels, and you do get that. These are mass-produced products.
Yeah.
If you want perfection, go drop 30 grand on a 28-inch Sony OLED grading monitor. That'll be perfect. You're talking about mass-produced consumer product. There is going to be variance. There is going to be some of these issues that do creep in. But QD seems to be very, very, very
excellent. Yeah. I mean, I would say though, Phil, that it is a bit dangerous to judge a panel on how it will be in the future as it is out the box, because these do bed in, they run in, they improve a lot. I mean, when I got my OLED, which is in my room here, that had some vignetting on the right hand side, and it's pretty much all cleared now. It's run through several compensation cycles. So,
which I was going to come on to the compensation cycle thing, because that is an important part of OLED. I think it's something that people forget as well. Never switch off the TV at the wall.
No.
If you have an OLED, you leave it in standby. It's only going to cost you a very small amount leaving it in standby in terms of power consumption. But what that OLED does is it will run cycles where it goes through and it basically compensates for any areas of that panel that have been exceptionally bright and other areas that are maybe a bit dark, and it tries to balance things out by running these cycles through and make the panel look more uniform. So do not unplug your OLED TV from the wall. Always leave it plugged in, and make sure through the menu system, they're usually on default, but you can make sure by going through the menu system and just make sure that it is set to do compensation cycles or compensation runs. They all do it. It's designed in there to improve the panel. So yeah, that's a good point. Thank you for raising it, Jules. So very quickly, we'll move on to LED LCD now. There's a few different approaches to this. Very rarely will you see a CCFL backlight LED nowadays. Most of them are LED LCDs, whether that's edge lit or full array local dimming or mini LED. They all have slightly different approaches, and this is where you get most of the issues because of these different approaches, because some of these screens use local dimming, which means that they have separate zones and so on. And of course, with the advent of HDR, we're now driving these panels a lot brighter than we were a number of years ago. You do start to see more issues, especially dirty screen effect. Now, dirty screen effect, it basically explains what you're seeing. It looks like the screen is dirty. It looks like there's some kind of clouding going on and so on. And that's usually caused by, on a local dimming TV, it's usually caused by these zones being slightly different, and you actually seeing the joins between these zones is normally what you see, and it's most prevalent when you got one color on screen. So say a football pitch, World Cup, and that camera is then panning across. That's the most noticeable dirty screen effect that you will see, or banding that you will see. And again, that's caused by the backlight. And you got to remember that you got this backlight, it's more or less on all the time. The pixels are trying to stop the light coming through if it's a dark area of the screen. Not very effective, and that's where you start getting these issues. So again, it's down to technologies. Different technologies have different issues with screen uniformity, but it is one of the most important areas of a display review, I would say. Always go and have a look and see if the reviewer is mentioning screen uniformity, and admitting that these things do change from panel to panel, especially LED LCD TVs, Jules. Plasma used to be really bad for it as well, but we'll give Plasma a break. But LED LCD, they can be quite different. Same model, same screen,
Absolutely. I mean, I've had situations where I've been calibrating video walls in sort of commercial premises, which have got, all the same panel, and they're all next to each other, but they don't look the same. And you calibrate them, and they still look slightly different. And and there's areas of that screen because of the uniformity issue, which is next to another panel, which has got a different contrast ratio because of the brightness of a corner or an edge, and it can look like a dog's dinner at times. So you have to be watching out for that.
Yeah. So again, we're kind of just skimming over the subject here, but it was a question that was raised. What is screen uniformity? Hopefully that kind of answers the question in basic terms as to what it is that we're actually talking about when we come to describing these issues. And of course, different reviewers will use slightly different terminology to describe the same thing. So again, be aware of that, that we could all just be talking about the same thing, just using different terms to describe what it is we're seeing. And there's video playing if you're watching this on YouTube that I deliberately took to the side of two Samsungs. One was a QD OLED and one was a LED LCD TV, and you quite clearly see the issues that we're talking about here. Also blooming. I mean, blooming can't be bad, but you can see just looking at the screen of axes, some of it will be navy blue and not black, and so on. And this is what we're talking about when we're talking about uniformity. So hopefully that answers your questions. I haven't seen any more coming in on the live chat, so we will come back to any questions that you post in the thread on the forums. So again, to wrap up tonight, we need to go to Ed and we need to talk about music. What is your album, vinyl, and playlist recommendations of the week, Ed?
Sorry, album and vinyl are one and the same, and I feel very weird putting this as album of the week because I'm not 100% convinced it's a great album, but it's an important album. Well, look, right, it's left field, and they don't release many albums. And for those of us of a certain age, the first two are so seminal as to mean that we tend to give them a bit of a free ride on this. This Is What We Do was released on Friday. It's their fourth. When I say the two original people that were present for Left Field for the first two albums, there's only one of them left. This has moments of greatness. And to say that, I'm not, sitting on the fence here. I've bought a copy. But the thing is, it's a and quite engaging modern electronica album. Does it sound and feel like left field? I don't know. I'm not sure. It's on all the major streaming services. Have a listen. See what you think. I mean, for those of you that love leftism, you might not want to give it a listen. If you are simply wanting to hear people do some interesting things, then give it a go. It's on the major streaming services. A friend of mine has also bought the vinyl. They say it's in good working order. I haven't actually played this one yet. I only bought it today. So that's the recommendation there. I mean, I would say that this got the nod in part because Friday was dead for new music. So as I have a blanket ban on Christmas albums being given the nod for album of the week, that's not happening. Podcast playlist of this one is on Qobuz, Listening with Sundar Ark. That was one of our recommended albums from a couple of podcasts back. Qobuz has obviously asked the people who are Sundar Ark to put together some similar albums and similar artists that they like. It's not a particularly long playlist. It's about 30 songs, I think. 20. 1 hour, 54 minutes. I mean, it's a blink of an eye compared to most playlists, but there's some interesting jumping off to some other artists there. If you like that sort of thing, it's a worthwhile listen because you can pick up some hints and tips as to where you might take your listening next. Again, quiet week for playlists as well, unless you want a Christmas playlist, which I don't. So there you have it.
Okay, thanks for that, Ed. It is appreciated. I will go and have a listen to some of those. You're always good with the recommendations. Right, just to wrap up, we're going to recommend TV shows to watch. I'm going to say everybody else is going to recommend because I've been too busy painting. I didn't watch any TV, and when I have switched TV on, it's that bloody football, and I'm not interested in that. Right, so Jules, what you recommend?
Well, I have started watching The English, which I found on iPlayer, and it's in HLG, and it looks rather good. And it's a Western, Emily Blunt, and it's pretty good. I'm really enjoying it so far. So that's what I've been watching. Yeah, but it's nothing to do with the England football team.
No, I think Kaz gave that a good review as well. So
yeah.
So yeah, check that out. I gave it a 9 out of 10. So yeah, Jules.
Yeah, solid.
Good, solid. Ed, what have you been watching?
The one I want to recommend is Slow Horses. Season 2 kicked off again on Apple TV. Season 1 is brilliant. If you haven't watched it and you have Apple TV, just drop everything. Go and watch it now. Gary Oldman, beautiful cinematography. It's shot well. It looks fantastic. Cracking acting, cracking plot. Season 2 is kicked off. It's 2 episodes to begin with. Third one's coming on Friday. Just get stuck in. It's brilliant. I'm absolutely loving it. And then obviously MasterChef The Professionals continues to whir along nicely in the background, and that's still great. So finals week now, so all very exciting. We find out who wins on Friday. That's me.
Okay, thanks, Ed. Ian?
I was on mute, wasn't I?
There's always one.
Yes, sorry, not planning ahead. And all the time when I was on mute, I was thinking, don't forget to turn off mute. Don't forget. Right on cue. Completely forgot. But yeah, what I've been watching, my recommendation would be, it's one of the perks of doing the new on Netflix listings for the AVF website, is that I get to watch a lot of sort of foreign trailers as well that I might otherwise miss. But you have to watch a lot to see what might be good. And one of the trailers that caught my eye was for a Norwegian film called Troll, which is, just another typical creature feature. Like, well, the way I describe it is kind of like the 90s version of Godzilla, but with half the budget and half the fluff. But it's quite like, but it's still a very engaging kind of, just a monster film if you just want a nice Saturday night sort of popcorn film. It's kind of a bit predictable, but it's good fun anyway. So I'd recommend that, even if, you do have to sit through some subtitles, but it's definitely worth a watch.
Okay. And Martin, what are you going to recommend?
Well, in LA, binge watched Andor Disney Plus. This new Star Wars canon, which is much, much darker than anything you've known about Star Wars before. But it's great fun. It's actually quite sinister. You really do see the sinister side of the Empire. Didn't quite know it would go to those lengths, but and there is an episode involving, I'm not going to give anything away, but it does involve a prison, and it is absolutely spellbinding watching. So anyway, recommended.
Okay, excellent. Well, that's our recommendations for viewing, and that's it for the Hardware podcast tonight. Stay tuned because the Movies podcast is coming out right now. And my thanks to Ed, to Ian, to Jules, and to Martin tonight. Thank you very much, guys.
Cheers. Always a pleasure.
And don't forget, we are back on the 19th of December. Join us then. Our special guest for the next podcast has just accidentally turned up, so there you go. Spoiler, you know who's coming next. But yeah, Christmas special is coming up on the 19th of December. All the team, Movies team and the Hardware team, we're all getting together for that, so join us on the 19th. No specific subjects at all. We're just going to tell you what we loved this year, AV wise, film wise, and otherwise. So join us for that one. If you've enjoyed this podcast, then please give us a like. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and the usual. You know what to do. And don't forget to join Kaz and the Movies team and our special guest tonight, David McKenzie. Hi, David. It's good to see you. Yeah, so David will be along for the Movies podcast, so tune in for that one as well. But I'm Phil Hinton. Thank you very much for watching and listening. And we'll check you out for the next podcast on the 19th. Good night.